Hi there, this is Marcy. I'm reading the Nantucket Current. Today is Wednesday, March 18th. The first story is Vineyard Wind completes construction of offshore wind farm by Colin A. Young, and it's dated March 14th. Following several tumultuous years of construction, including the infamous blade failure in July 2024 and stop work orders by President Donald Trump's administration, Vineyard Wind's 62 turbine wind farm off Nantucket has been completed. The final blades of the Vineyard Wind 1 project were installed Friday evening, a Vineyard Wind spokesman said, completing the project's offshore construction program. The spokesman said the project continues to deliver some power to the New England grid. More work remains before the project is fully operational. Eventually, the wind farm, about 15 miles south of Martha's Vineyard, is expected to generate just more than 800 megawatts of power with its 62 turbines. The project's energy comes ashore at a grid interconnection point in Barnstable. A decade after Massachusetts chose to focus its pursuit of cleaner energy generation largely on offshore wind, construction is complete on Vineyard Wind 1 as the wind industry faces difficult political and economic conditions that have led to a re-evaluation of the state's climate and emission plans and policies. Vineyard Wind 1 was the first offshore wind project selected by Massachusetts utility companies with input from the Baker administration to fulfill part of a 2016 clean energy law, and could be the only Massachusetts offshore wind project to become a reality this decade. Subsequently, selected projects ran into headwinds that developers determined threatened their ability to finance their projects and resulted in the termination of those contracts. That Vineyard 1 could be constructed at all has not always been a sure thing. Project developers originally planned to close financing on the project and begin onshore construction work in 2019, put the first turbine into the seabed in 2021, and begin generating electricity in 2022. But the Trump administration in the summer of 2019 decided to undertake a broad study of the potential impacts of offshore wind projects planned up and down the East Coast, holding up a key permit approval for Vineyard Wind 1. Vineyard Wind announced on December 1 of that year that it was pulling its project out of the federal review pipeline. The Trump administration declared the federal review of the project terminated. Less than a month into Joe Biden's presidency, in February 2021, the federal government resumed the review of the Vineyard Wind 1 project from the point at which the developer withdrew it. By May of 2021, the Biden administration had approved the project's construction and operations plan and cleared the way for construction to begin. The first electrons from the project began flowing in early 2024, but one of the project's massive blades shattered in the summer of 2024, bringing operations to a halt and prompting investigations. Power production had resumed by January 2025. When fully operational, Vineyard Wind 1 was projected to produce at least 3,600 jobs, reduce costs for Massachusetts ratepayers by an estimated $1.4 billion over 20 years, and eliminate 1.68 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions annually. The next story is titled Bail Set at $50,000 for Nantucket Cocaine Trafficking Suspect, written by David Creed. It's dated March 17th, 2026. A judge in Barnstable set bail at $50,000 on Tuesday for a Nantucket resident charged with cocaine trafficking last week. William Sarney, 62, was in Barnstable District Court Tuesday morning for a dangerousness hearing following last week's arrest on charges of trafficking cocaine. Authorities believe Sarney was working with two other individuals, including island resident Edward Gillespie, who is facing charges in both Barnstable District Court and Nantucket District Court after a car thief allegedly uncovered a kilogram of cocaine in Gillespie's car while attempting to break in and reported it to the police in January. Sarney had his bail set at $50,000 cash, $500,000 surety by District Court Judge Therese M. Wright, and was ordered to wear a GPS monitoring device as part of his release. Sarney was ordered to return to court April 15th for a probable cause hearing. As of Tuesday afternoon, Sarney had not posted bail and remained in custody. Sarney was one of two individuals arrested last Thursday after a months-long investigation by the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office and Barnstable Police Department that was prompted by an overdose in Barnstable County in November. Sarney is facing a charge of conspiracy to violate drug law, felony, and trafficking cocaine in an amount of 200 grams or more. Sarney is alleged by prosecutors to have been working alongside Gillespie and Andre Sylvia, a 56-year-old Wareham man who was arraigned in Wareham District Court last week and will be arraigned in Barnstable District Court on a later date. Prosecutors have used cell phone records and surveillance footage to tie the three individuals together. This investigation began during the month of November 2025 when members of the State Police Detective Unit assigned to the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office investigated a fatal overdose in Barnstable County, the District Attorney's Office said in a release. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner ruled that the cause of death was a diabetic ketoacidosis complicated by cocaine intoxication. Through investigative efforts, Andre Sylvia was identified as the main supplier of the cocaine. Throughout the investigation, William Sarney was also tied to Sylvia through an investigation by the Barnstable Police Department. Sarney's home was searched by members of the Barnstable Police Department, Cape and Islands State Police Detective Unit, and Nantucket Police Department. Sylvia's home was searched by members of the Cape and Islands State Police Detective Unit, Barnstable Police Detective Department, DEA Cape Cod Task Force, Wareham Police Department, Plymouth County State Police Detective Unit, Sandwich Police Department, Nantucket Police Department, and Massachusetts State Police Crime Scene Service Section. Okay, the next story is titled After Stroll Booze Violation, Bar Yoshi Facing Potential Suspension of Liquor License by John Carl McGrady, and it's dated March 16th. Popular sushi restaurant Bar Yoshi will undergo changes of ownership and management after liquor law violations during last year's Nantucket Christmas Stroll event, the restaurant's attorney told the Select Board Monday. As a result of the violations, the restaurant now has a potential suspension hanging over its head as the summer season approaches. Any complaints could lead the Select Board to revoke its alcohol permit for next year's stroll, a potential major loss of revenue. According to licensing administrator Amy Baxter, Bar Yoshi was serving alcohol in open containers on the wharf during Christmas stroll, outside of its designated permit area. Bar Yoshi, next to their licensed premises in an area on Old South Wharf, were operating a mobile bar using their catering van, Baxter told the Select Board on Monday during a hearing on the violation. The bar service was not in a defined space at all. It was, as you can see in the photos, just parked there with a line, and the service area was not actively supervised by any staff members. They also allegedly allowed customers to take the alcohol off-site with no supervision. Folks bought alcohol and walked around, sat on the benches elsewhere. I saw it going out to the street. There was absolutely nothing or no one stopping them from leaving the area with alcohol, Baxter said. Essentially, the alcohol was sold and served without any license. It's as if someone drove up and opened a bar. The alcohol was served in open containers. Customers were allowed to leave the area with an open container, and open containers were witnessed throughout the Old South Wharf retail area and adjacent public streets. Baxter laid the blame squarely on manager and co-owner Terence Noyes and emphasized that the restaurant has been the subject of several complaints in recent years. There's a long history here of issues that have existed with this licensee and manager. It was clear that there was no one giving the operating staff the proper direction for this type of activity, she said. The failure was definitely at the manager level. This has been a location that has been a challenge. Bar Yoshi attorney Jesse Bell said that Noyes will be removed as manager and that a request to change both the licensed management and owner of record will come before the select board next month. Bar Yoshi also plans to improve staff training and management oversight. Co-owners Mark Knight and Robert Baldock attended the select board's meeting, and Knight spoke briefly to agree with Bell's comments to the board. Noyes, who appears to be the odd man out, did not attend. Noyes declined to comment when reached by the Current. There was some discussion of a harsher penalty for Bar Yoshi, but the select board ultimately agreed that the threat of a suspension was enough. My guess is that this has come to a head, and they know and will be fine now, Select Board Vice Chair Matt Fee said. We're not letting them off the hook in any way, Baxter said. Okay, the next article is titled, 3 NHS Juniors Urge School Committee to Reform GPA System. It is by David Creed and dated March 15th. While Hunter Bistany, Russell Simpson, Jake Clark, and some of their friends were on Aspen, the online platform used by Nantucket High School students to access student data, including their GPA, they noticed something peculiar about the grading system. Simpson, who was taking an advanced placement AP college-level English class and earned a B+ for the quarter, received the same number of points towards his GPA as one of his classmates, who earned an A in their college preparatory CP standard high school course, English course. We were like, that's interesting, Bistany said during a presentation to the Nantucket School Committee last Tuesday. We know Russell is working on an essay per week, and our friend was laughing, saying, haha, I only had to do one essay the whole quarter. We decided, okay, we don't think that is very fair, and we would like to look into it and see if we can do something about it. Bistany, Simpson, and Clark presented a PowerPoint to the school committee outlining differences in workloads across course levels, the limited incentive the existing GPA system offers students to take on more challenging courses, and the importance of GPA in the college admissions screening process. The goal of the students' proposal is to bring the way NHS calculates GPA more in line with other comparable schools such as Sandwich High School, which was cited in the presentation, to create a more fair differentiation between college preparatory honors and AP coursework, rewarding the students who are taking on a heavier workload in higher level courses for their success. The current GPA system doesn't sufficiently show the difference between those levels of classes, Simpson said. In a CP class, you could have up to 10 to 30 minutes of homework per night, while in an AP class, you could have 60 to 120 minutes per night. Their request to the committee was to initiate a review of the current GPA weighting structure to evaluate whether it accurately reflects academic rigor, provide guidance on the best way to implement a modified system, and continue to collaborate with school administrators and student representatives throughout the process. We believe aligning the GPA calculations with other high schools around the district and many colleges, it will help us accurately represent the work we do in school, Clark said. We believe strengthening the academic transparency will also bring fairness to everyone. Bistany said, based on the current scale, earning an A in a CP course is 4.4 points, an honors A is 4.7 points, and an AP A is 5 points. The proposed system by the three juniors increased the gap by 0.2 points. An A in CP course would be worth 4 points, an A in honors course would be worth 4.5 points, and an A in AP class would remain 5 points. I think it is interesting you guys came up with this, committee member Dr. Tim Lepore said. It will level things out so the harder work gets a better nod. Dr. Lepore and I support this. We think it is an excellent idea to bring us with the other schools across the region. Committee Chair Laura Gallagher Burns said, I think it makes a lot of sense. The trio presented two possible approaches to implement a new system. Their preferred approach is freshman only implementation, which would mean the updated proposal would begin with the incoming freshman class to ensure long term structural consistency and while avoiding mixed scale transcripts. The alternative would be a multi grade implementation, which means that moving forward, all grades would have the new system applied to their GPA. Some of the issues with this method include students having a GPA calculations under two different systems and more clear, concise documentation and communication being required in order to avoid issues down the line. We would preferably do it at the beginning of next year, Bistany said. Committee member Vincent Murphy asked whether changing the point structure mid-year would cause complications for teachers and grading. Bistany reiterated that ideally a new system gets implemented ahead of next year. Superintendent Beth Hallett also clarified to the members that the grading teachers implement is numeric from 1 to 100, so this change wouldn't impact them, only the way the calculation comes through on Aspen. A vote is scheduled to be taken on this proposal during the school committee's March 24th meeting. The next article is titled State Sides with Developers in Surfside Crossing Appeal. And it's written by Jace Graziadei and dated March 12th. The State Housing Appeals Committee has issued a proposed decision in favor of Surfside Crossings developers, marking the latest chapter in the protracted legal fight over the controversial 40B housing development off South Shore Road. The appeal to the HAC was filed by Surfside Crossings developers Jamie Feely and Josh Posner last April after the Nantucket Zoning Board of Appeals voted unanimously to deny its application for a 156-unit condominium complex off South Shore Road. The proposed decision, which would overturn ZBA's denial and allow the project to move forward, must still be finalized following a 2-week period in which both sides will be allowed to provide comments or objections. The Housing Appeals Committee has reviewed the concerns of the board and the opponents in detail and concludes that the denial of a permit to this well-designed development, which will address critical housing needs in Nantucket, was not based on substantial local needs that outweigh the regional need for affordable housing. That is, the development will not compromise the health, safety, or other interests of nearby residents, of the occupants of the housing, or of the town generally, the decision reads. Based upon review of the entire record upon the findings of fact and discussion above, the Housing Appeals Committee concludes that the decision of the board is not consistent with local needs, the HAC wrote. The decision of the board is vacated, and board is directed to issue an amended comprehensive permit that conforms to the application of Surfside Crossing, LLC, as modified and as provided in the text of this decision and subject to the following conditions. The political action group Nantucket Tipping Point, which has opposed Surfside Crossing for years and initiated numerous legal challenges to block the project, released a statement critical of the HAC's decision. The proposed HAC decision by presiding officer Warner Lowy comes as no surprise, particularly given that he is the same presiding officer whose previous HAC decision regarding the Surfside Crossing was decisively overturned by the Superior Court after Nantucket Tipping Point, together with our longtime partners at the Nantucket Land Council, appealed the ruling, said Tipping Point member Will Willauer and Megan Perry in a statement. In that case, the Superior Court found that HAC's decision, led by the same hearing officer, to be arbitrary, unreasonable, and inconsistent. Many, if not all, of the serious questions raised by Nantucket Tipping Point remain unanswered. Given this lack of accountability and clarity, it is difficult to see how a future appeal before the Supreme Court would lead to a different outcome for this development or this HAC proposed decision. They added that Nantucket Tipping Point will be weighing all available legal options regarding the Surfside Crossing matter. Feely and Posner, the project developers, declined to comment due to the fact that the proposed decision is not yet finalized. Last April, after more than 6 months of hearings on the details of Surfside Crossing's proposed 156 condominium dwellings in 18 multifamily dwelling units and the potential impacts of such a dense development, the members of the ZBA were unanimous in their disapproval. They expressed deep reservations about the project's potential impact on water quality, fire safety, and access to the site, concluding that those factors outweighed the need for additional housing units that would be created by Surfside Crossing. The board finds that the stormwater management system, as proposed, poses undue risk of harm to the town's public water supply, the board wrote in its decision. Again, unfortunately, the applicant refuses to consider any alteration to its project design, despite many requests by the board for a good faith dialogue. But throughout its 55-page decision, the HAC determined that those concerns did not outweigh the regional need for housing. Shortly after the ZBA's decision, Feely and Posner filed the appeal to the HAC and released a blistering critique of the denial, which they called biased and the result of unequal treatment. The board's denial is evidence of a clear bias against this development and constitutes unequal treatment in violation of state law, Feely and Posner said in a statement. The stormwater system we not only proposed but installed is in the highest tier of all other such systems on the island and in the Commonwealth. We respectfully believe we should be held to the same standards that the rest of the community, town, and state are subject to. Our focus remains on human health, inclusive of the physical, fiscal, social, emotional, and spiritual aspects as related to the built environment. We are happy to be headed back to the Housing Appeals Committee for the next phase of this process, which we trust will be focused on only the changes from the original proposal. The appeal by Surfside Crossing's developers was heard by the State Committee, which rules on the disputes over 40B projects and previously endorsed the plans for Surfside Crossing, only to have a Superior Court judge remand it back to the ZBA for further review back in January 2024. Surfside Crossing's 156 condominium units would be contained within 18 three-story buildings, 2 stories above grade, on 13 acres off South Shore Road that were cleared in August 2023. As a Chapter 40B development, 25% of those units are required by the state to be deed restricted for affordable housing, or a total of 39 units within the development to residents earning at or below 80% of the area median income. The other 17 units would be sold at market rate, priced between $500,000 and $1.5 million. The hearings before the ZBA in 2025 were considered a remand, as it was the result of a Nantucket Superior Court judge's decision back in January 2024 to review the state approval for Surfside Crossing and send the project back to ZBA for further review. Judge Mark Gildia's decision was the result of legal challenges brought against the project by the Nantucket Land Council and a group of neighbors. They had appealed the State Housing Appeal Committee's approval of the project in September 2022, and its ruling that Surfside Crossing's 156 condominium unit proposal under Chapter 40B did not constitute a substantial change from what had previously been approved by the Nantucket Zoning Board of Appeals, a scaled-down development of 60 single-family homes and 96 condominiums. In April 2023, the town announced that it was dropping its lawsuit against Surfside Crossing after reaching a collaborative agreement with the developers. The agreement outlines a commitment by the Select Board and the Surfside Crossing developments to earmark 75% of 156 condominiums in the development to directly serve year-round housing needs. That goal would be accomplished through long-term deed restrictions at a variety of income levels. Critics noted at the time that there was nothing in writing that could bind Surfside Crossing's developers to such restrictions, and the dismissal of the town's lawsuit sparked frustrations from Mondani in May and blindsided the board as a whole. Feely subsequently said in a statement that he hoped potential partnerships and collaborations with the town, as well as with island businesses and organizations, would result in up to 75%, the 117 market rate units, ending up in local ownership. The plans for the Surfside Crossing were filed under a state statute known as Chapter 40B, which allows developers to bypass local zoning regulations and increase density if at least 20 to 25% of the new units have long-term affordability restrictions. And that is it in terms of what we have time for today. This is Marcy signing off.